Welcome and thanks for joining us for today's webinar, Onychomycosis, Past, Present, and Future. We don't plan on holding anything back today. We'll end up sharing both our highs and our lows of over a decade of dedicated research of nail fungus. Before we get started though, we'd like to send a special thanks out to Dr. Carrie Zane and Dr. Robert Sullivan for their dedication to Erconia and all the research we performed together. My name is Travis. With us today, we have Erconia's president, Steve Shanks, and head of research. This is part 3 of our research webinar series. The past 2 were on our pain lasers and our fat loss device. Steve and I like to treat this more as an open discussion roundtable. So at any time, if you got any questions, feel free to enter them into the questions tab, which should be in the top right hand of your screen there. Then we'll make sure to pause and answer them right there on the spot. To get started though, we'll go ahead and just pass it to Steve and let him really explain the background to Erconia and then the commitment to the research.
Hello everyone, my name is Stephen Shanks. I am the president of Erconia. I've been doing research with low-level lasers since about 1998. Travis has been working with me for the last several years. We've been very lucky to work with some doctors that would dedicate themselves to the science of low-level laser therapy, proving some of our concepts all the way from pilot studies through clinical trials. Right now we're sitting at 18 510Ks. These are all based on FDA input. Most of them are all blinded and controlled study, as you'll see with this onychomycosis clinical trial. The FDA did not require placebos in this. Their feeling was that toenail fungus just does not get better. And we'll get started.
All right, so onychomycosis isn't the only thing we're doing in the podiatry or derm field. We also have a FDA cleared device, which is the first and only laser for plantar fasciitis. We have a ongoing study right now for diabetic peripheral neuropathy. It's a level 1 study. We have 3 clinical sites. And then one thing I actually left off the screen here is we have the same device there, which is the FX635, has a overall musculoskeletal pain indication. So for the podiatrists out there, anything soft tissue, extremity, ligaments, tendons, tissue, things like that, you can actually mark it for.
This is our manufacturing facility. We build everything in-house. We are a family-based business from our inception. It was Kevin, my brother's idea to create jobs for the family. So you can see that's a picture of our machine shop. Most all the parts are manufactured in-house. Obviously, our laser diodes, our circuit boards, they're built to our specs. And as you start going through this presentation, in all of our lasers, we build devices for a clinical application. So that means basically, if we're doing toenail fungus, we're not going to develop a device that's going to be handheld. We did that in a concept study, but we found out when we went to clinical trial, nobody wants to treat toenail fungus with a handheld device and stand over toes all day long. So that was one of the thoughts behind the Lunula device.
Yeah, as Steve mentioned, we are located in Melbourne, Florida, so it's all USA built, self-reliant. We're able to really produce and manufacture about 85% of all of our products. So we'll just take a real quick dive into what the past treatment options were prior to Lunula.
And this is something that we like to educate people when you're treating toenail fungus, because unlike our pain management lasers, where we'll normally see a result after the first treatment, maybe even with some of our fat devices, toenail fungus, it's a little bit tough. Fingernails go pretty quick, about 2 to 3 millimeters a month. Toes grow about 1 millimeter a month. So that means if your great toe is 15 millimeters long, it's going to take 15 millimeters for that toe to grow out. If it's infected, it's been documented that they stop growing. They grow very, very slowly. So it's really good to educate your patients that, if they have some diseases like vascular disease, onychomycosis, if they're older, as our immune systems wear down, the nail is not going to grow that fast. And you kind of see as we go through this presentation, we ran into this problem with the FDA.
So prior to the Lunula and even up till now, all the other laser devices work through thermal heat. You know, a few issues with thermal heat is one is they can create soft tissue damage. And as Steve just showed on the last screen, you actually have about 5 millimeters of nail behind the skin itself. So the nice thing with the Lunula, which we'll show you here in a second, is not only is it targeting the skin, but it actually targets up to about the forefoot. You also, it's painful, as you guys know. Most people report it a 5 out of 10. It creates a smoke fume, not very effective, and then labor intensive. So the picture on the right, if you guys have used kind of the pinpoints and things like that in the past, you got to go millimeter by millimeter. It's time consuming, it's stressful on the neck, the back. You also put yourself at a liability because you can create damage. As you see here, a publication, the European Academy of Dermatology, patients with diabetic neuropathy should not undergo laser treatment, for they might not be able to feel the heat and they might get burned. And then you have kind of a nasty picture there of a potential case of laser neuropathy. And then to kind of address the black cloud around laser therapy or hot lasers. And some of it, you know, you can definitely justify it. It's rightfully so. Pinpoint Laser had their data retracted after most people already purchased it due to potential flawed design. And this is right off of clinicaltrials.gov. You also have systematic reviews such as this one here, which has a lot of negative outcomes with laser therapy. One thing though, if you take a dive into that systematic review, as well as a lot of the other publication, there's common denominators why hot lasers do not work or have poor study success. First, hot lasers showed best results on mild to moderate infection, and then really poor results on severe infection. One thing we'll show you in the Lunula clinical studies, we treated anywhere from 20% infection up to 100% infection. And really the results didn't differ between the two groups. The only thing is, obviously, once you're at the 100% infection, it's just going to take a little bit longer for that nail to grow out. The second thing was a majority of the devices use laser in conjunction with nail lacquers and are antifungal creams in the clinical trial. So you're not quite sure if the lasers are working or if it's the creams. When Lunula ran its clinical studies, we did not use nail lacquers or creams, and we didn't debride the nail. So now you know exactly what you're getting effectiveness-wise with the laser. We'd still advise you to practice as you would, especially with the debridement of the nail. And then if you want to end up using topicals and things of that sort, feel free. You're only going to add on to our clinical results. And then third, and most importantly, every single laser mentioned in this systemic review here was infrared, which kind of leads us to our next slide. And I'll let Steve kind of tackle this one, but not all lasers are created equal.
Yeah, so when we look at low-level laser therapy, you know, we fight a lot of the results with hot lasers. Doctors saying, look, I tried them, they're expensive, they don't work that well. The nice thing about low-level lasers is we're creating photochemical reactions. Think of photochemical reactions compared to a drug like a biochemical reaction. The difference between photochemical and biochemical, we're targeting a lot of the same mechanisms, but we're not suppressing the immune system. With low-level laser therapy, we know we're a boost of immune function to treat the disease. How do we know that? It's because we've done research at the University of Illinois, for example, and looked at interleukin 10, which shows immune function. And we were able to boost immune function with red laser therapy. And with the laser, with a hot laser, if, like Travis said, if you're going from 1 millimeter to the next millimeter and you miss a spot, you still left fungus. Where with low-level lasers, we're creating systemic effects and we're treating the entire foot.
So I know, Steve, going back to 2009, really when all this started, obviously there's a market for nail fungus. It's reported about 10% of people have it. The issue with the hot lasers we've already covered. So creating this solution, we wanted to create something that was both safe and effective, proven through clinical research, that it can actually treat the soft tissue around the nail itself. We wanted to treat all 5 toes at once, because the problem, if you treat one toe, there's a good chance the other one's already infected or it's going to get infected during the treatment cycle. And we want to make it easy to use. And with that being said, I know, Steve, you were a major part of a lot of these patents here, so if you want to cover those.
Yes, if we have a lot of patents on processes and devices. Like I stated earlier, we create devices for specific indications. So we do have a patent on the Lunula device, and we also have a patent on the process of Lunula. So if you're using a low-level laser to treat onychomycosis, not only do we have a patent, but we're the only one that has a 510K indication. A patent means it's something that we created before it was ever documented, before pretty much anybody ever thought about it. And it kind of shows Arconia's dedication to science.
Yeah, so here you have a patent for the process, but then the application of low-level laser for a fungal infection. And then here's a quick video, 30 seconds long, just to show you the device and how easy it is to use.
Questions?
Okay, so it looks like there's a question. Unfortunately, it may have got cut off, but do we need to, I'm thinking that's prepare the nails before inserting them into the Lunula machine?
No, in our clinical trials, there was nothing to prepare. There was no alcohol wipes. There was no antifungals. We just did toenail clippings to confirm the fungus, and then we treated them.
And it's like whoever sent that question, and like I said, it kind of came over a little bit as gibberish. So if that wasn't the particular question, feel free to resubmit it and we'll make sure to answer that.
I bring this one up first. This is Dr. Robert Sullivan's work out of Ireland, which it's a great place to do toenail fungus because it's raining all the time. He met a gentleman named Simon Ramshaw. Simon does, he runs our UK office and all our European distribution along with the Middle East. And when he met Rob said, look, he goes, I'll do toes for you. I'll do toes. I'll follow them out 3 years. And I'm going to tell you if this device works or not. And I'll give you an honest opinion based on scientific representation. And I'm not going to soft code. If it works, you know, I'll stand behind it. If it doesn't, I'm going to let you know. So we donated a couple lasers to Rob, and Rob did some absolutely unbelievable research. We introduced this device first in Europe because we didn't have a 510K in the US. So most of our sales started out in Europe. So we had a pretty good idea as we were going through the FDA process, what we were going to get, which really helps us when we start, as you see, as we go through this process, some of the problems of dealing with the FDA.
Right. So FDA communications, November 2009 through January 2011. Just want to put those dates up there. So the next couple of slides that we go through, kind of keep that in mind, how long it takes not only to get through FDA, but sometimes just to get a clear-cut answer. A lot of our studies that we do here at Arconia typically take 5 to 8 years, which was the same for this study here.
So this was so how we do protocols with the FDA is when we have an idea, we write up the protocol through our regulatory consultant. We send that protocol to the FDA, and we look for comments from the FDA. Like, what are you looking for? What's going to take this get through the FDA so we can get a 510K for this device so we can legally market it. We've gone through this procedure, you know, probably 30 times at this point. Obviously, all of our clinical trials are not a success. And we're going to kind of walk you through some of our failures. And if you could see the bottom comments, that's Richard Felton from the FDA. He's now retired, but he says, we're presently thinking our endpoints for onychomycosis. We've had several discussions with different companies and have seen some data. Thus far, none of what we have seen or discussed with companies has really satisfied us in terms of data appearing to be adequate. Once we have completed these discussions, I will get back in touch with you. And you can see this is 2/9/2010. So this was our first Lunula clinical trial. At this point, we're waiting on the FDA. We already knew what we were getting, and in 2009, we started a clinical trial. At this point, I'd probably done, we'd probably done a dozen clinical trials. So we had a pretty good idea based on some of our conversations with them of what they were looking to get. And these were kind of some of the results that we'd seen. And from there, you could kind of see the percent of nail involved with onychomycosis at baseline. So we were looking at, broke them out in categories, 50 to less than 50%, 51 to 79%, 80 to 90%, and 100%. This is how much involvement was in the nail as far as onychomycosis. And these were kind of the results. So you can look at 50%. You can see at the end point, there was like 9%. And again, endpoint here is, we're kind of walk through that, and you can see the improvement in clear nail. What we didn't know at this point is the FDA wasn't necessarily interested in the doctor's improvement in clear nail. They wanted us to measure how much clear nail was actually, was growing through. So you can see we look at 51 to 79%, 80 to 90%, and 100%. We're about 50% effective. So this is 1/2011. So Richard Felton gets back to us. He says, following email exchanges, subsequent teleconference call, all recommendations by Mr. Felton and Ms. Stockton were incorporated in the clinical trial. So after that first clinical trial wasn't accepted, we started a second clinical trial. So this clinical trial incorporated everything that the FDA told us at this point that they were looking for in this clinical trial. They wanted 3 millimeters of new fungal clearance, which we didn't know in the first clinical trial. So
Yeah.
then, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, we're 2 years later here. We're setting up the second clinical study, which is this guy here.
So again, we're looking at percent involvement. The FDA wanted a minimum of 25% involvement. So again, we broke this out in 25 to 49, 50 to 75, and 75 to 100%. And these were all great toes. They didn't really care about, the rest of the toes like we did in our first clinical trial. But we did capture the data on all those toes, which they all cleared up. So you could kind of see some of the results. So based on the millimeters, 4.6 was the baseline, and they went from 9.59. So we thought this study would be successful and we would get the clearance. Obviously, that did not happen. So you could see baseline 2 months after treatment. So this is 3 months out and 4 months out. So you could see how much clearance we're getting with these nails at 3 months. Which at this point, the FDA was questioning this data because how are we getting that much clearance in 3 months? They hadn't seen this before. So we submitted our second clinical trial study to the FDA in 2012.
And it seems like a good stopping point. We do have a question. It's actually a really good question. How exactly do lasers work?
Really good question. So with the FDA, we always have to describe a mechanism of action or how we think we're doing it. Obviously, if you're treating with a heat laser, you're trying to create enough heat to destroy that fungus. The problem is if the fungus is in the soft bed or the soft tissue or in the nail bed itself, you're not going to get to it. So we propose to the FDA, if you use for instance, a 405 nanometer, you're going to create reactive oxygen species. With 635 nanometers, the peak for nitric oxide. Those two processes together are combined for peroxynitrite. Peroxynitrite has been proven to be antifungal. So that was the mechanism that we proposed to the FDA and what they accepted. Eventually, when we got the 510K.
Awesome. So going back to the slides here, it's March 2012. Second clinical study results submitted to FDA. And that kind of leads us to our next time frame there.
So this is kind of how it works with the FDA. We submit our data, it's signed a reviewer. The first request for additional information comes in. We address the items. Second request, if you don't answer all their questions, and in this particular submission, 6/28/2012, we have to withdraw the letter from the FDA because they did not accept the data. So at this point, as a company, after going through this process, and understand, when you're looking at toes 6 to 12 months out, these studies, they're long, they're a pain in the ass on the doctors because getting these patients come back in time and time again to get documentation, it's not a lot of fun. So FDA feedback from the second study, Clear Nail study showed clinically significant results. So they agreed that the results seemed to be clinically significant, but they have to decide if they should have requested a positive mycology as part of the first study in the pre-ID review designs. So remember, the first study we submitted, they didn't accept. This is the second study, which they're seeing as their first study, but we did not do positive mycology in this study. So again, all this research, it's basically, we're starting all over again. We knew what we were getting because we were seeing the results, which kept us motivated to stay with this particular procedure.
We just had a question come across. Is there medication that must not be taken in conjunction with the Lunula treatment? None, not necessarily. I mean, during our clinical studies, obviously the patients weren't allowed to use like Lamisil, things like oral medication, anything that could affect the results, but nothing, no medication other than that would exclude a patient.
And just one thing Travis brings up, in our case report forms on all of our patients in all of our clinical trials, we track daily what they're taking. So if they were basically, they started, you know what, I'm frustrated with this, I'm going to take Lamisil, they would be excluded from the study. So luckily for us, they can't use toenail polish. If you're in a study for 6 months or a year and you're not using toenail polish, we let them know, come into the study, look, to be part of the study, you can't use anything. So we're trying to, this is hard research, anything else that you're doing in your clinic, we highly suggest you use it. So our third clinical trial set up, obviously we're using positive mycology. And again, 109 gray toes. We treated the second digits because we wanted to capture the study. We did 20 to 100% occlusion. We created our own digital photograph system. And we also used measurements, millimeter clear nail, calculation of percentage of onychomycosis, and the clinical study success is 60% of toenails treated need to meet a minimum of 3 millimeters of greater clearance. So we're getting more information from the FDA on this particular, on this clinical trial. And by this point, there have been devices that have been cleared, so we're kind of behind the 8 ball.
Yeah, and as Steve mentioned before, during the first study, that picture to the far right or bottom right, that's the inclusion of the percentage of onychomycosis in the toes. We're not trying to shy away from those of more included nails. So if you look at even 75% to 100%, that was 43% of the subjects that were included in the study.
So, and these are kind of some of the results that you'll see. So if you're gonna look at all toes, and then we broke it out in gray toes. And if you look at chart 4, if you can read that, the cumulative percentage of toenail obtaining complete clearing across study duration. Complete clearing for us obviously means 3 millimeters. So we're just kind of showing the percentage of success to the FDA at this point of what we're showing between gray toes and second toes and all toes as we're trying to get this 510K submission.
This is actually just really a duplicate of what Steve just mentioned, though. If you look at like week, for example, 48 weeks, all toenails, 92% actually had complete toenail clearance.
So 96, 134 of 139 of all toes met the success criteria of 3 millimeters new growth at 36 weeks. So at this particular clinical trial, we looked at 36 weeks was when we decided success for this particular clinical trial. So at this point, we're feeling pretty good about this particular clinical trial. So some of the things we're dealing with the FDA, the problem with toenail fungus, it does not grow in straight lines. So what we're showing you here is, if you look at those top screen, that's the camera system that we created. The doctors kind of drew some lines to outlaw the fungus. Obviously, those lines are going to disappear over 36 weeks. But here we're documenting the clearing of the nail. Remember, in this clinical trial, all we need is 3 millimeters of clear nail.
A couple more before and afters here.
A couple more before and afters. If you look at that bottom one, you'll see the circle. And what we're pointing out in that dot is you can kind of see how that dot starts moving up. Go back to that slide you just had. The one thing as you're looking at these pictures, and you're going to see this in pretty much every one of these pictures, at baseline, look at the soft tissue around the nail. And this happens in every one of these pictures.
Yeah.
That soft tissue completely changes. Now, whether that's fungus, whether it's a bacterial infection, whether it's lack of blood flow, just kind of watch all these as we're walking through these through time.
Yeah, we have a couple more before and afters to kind of wrap things up. You'll see a lot of the improvement in the tissue as well. We do have a good question. How long is the treatment? It's 12 minutes per foot.
So fourth FDA submission. So at this point, I mean, obviously you can understand a little bit of our submission, our frustration with the FDA. So the FDA wanted us to answer some questions. How are you seeing nail clearing this quick? We have not seen that before. So we hired a guy named Ray Lanzafame, who I've known Ray for several years. He's a consultant to the FDA, and he wrote us a paper of why low-level laser therapy would increase nail growth. We also did some laser Doppler, and from there on, if you look on the right, you can kind of see pre-laser and post-laser therapy. And you know that white part, that's the actual nail. Where below that, you can see we're infecting the entire toe. So all what we're trying to propose to the FDA is, look, we're regenerating this nail, which you're going to see in some other pictures coming up. So finally, I asked Neil Ogden, I go, Neil, are you going to give me a indication for accelerated nail growth? And Neil goes, no, Mr. Shanks, you will not get that indication. I go, so what really does this matter? So we are not making any claims toward accelerated nail growth, but that question kind of went away with the FDA. So this was the next one that was extremely frustrating. So software validation study. So the FDA said, look, you measured the study with the calipers and you compare it to the GIMP software what you did with those pictures that we showed you earlier. How do we know it's valid? How do we know that software that you're using is valid? So we had to go back with 3 different clinicians, 20 patients each, looking at pre and post pictures, each of them, that were basically scrambled up, and each doctor had to go back and validate what the millimeter mark, what the GIMP software measured it at, and what the calipers measured it at. So the FDA said, look, we'll give you about a 60% success rate. If that's good, we'll accept your software validation study. Now, accepting a software validation study sounds pretty simple. It took us a year to validate the software, but it's everything we use. It's absolutely fabulous software. It saves time. It's accurate to 100th of a millimeter. And finally, the FDA accepted the software validation. So you could see, we're not trying to soft soap, but you'll kind of see the pre and post pictures here is like 2.49 compared to 9.79. So they got 7.3 millimeters of clear growth. And you can kind of see, this is what the GIMP software shows and what it measures, which is validated to calipers.
Yeah, if you even look at the third picture down, they had an increase of 1.42 millimeters. That's actually a study's failure because they had to meet at least 3 millimeters of new clear nail growth. Overall, though, if you look at the picture, you definitely can see improvement there. I just want to point out, obviously laser, you're doing nail fungus, it's not going to work 100% of the time. We're confident you're going to see improvement. It's just one of those things you got to, be realistic case by case, though.
And then again, look at the soft tissue in these pictures.
Yep.
The pre and post changes. That second one down, you can see how the nails completely changed. That whatever's under that nail bed is pretty much healed. So that's one of the things that we keep looking at. Is just we're basically regenerating tissue.
Yeah. So we started the Lunula project back in October 2009. 6 years and 8 months and 4 FDA submissions later, we finally got to pop the champagne as the Lunula laser received the first and only FDA 510K for non-thermal laser. That was in June 3rd, 2016. Anything you want to add to that, Steve?
No, I mean, obviously you can see this is one project. We're always running clinical trials going on. This is a 7-year project before we can actually sell this device. But, you know, it's just Erconia's dedication to research.
Yeah, another good question. How many treatments are you recommending and at what interval?
Every one of our clinical treatment, up to this point, every one of our treatments was 12 minutes once a week for 4 weeks. So every clinical trial, we ran the exact same protocol. We knew the protocol was working. And again, you know, can you go back to those pictures?
Yeah.
So we started getting a lot of questions. Okay, I see some clearing, but how come that toe isn't completely clear? Again, this is 6 months out. Those toes, if they're 15 millimeters long, if it's a healthy nail, it's going to take 15 months for that nail to clear out. If it's an 18 millimeter length of toenail, it's going to take 18 months. So, and you'll kind of see this kind of comes up in the future. So we published our results in Dermatology magazine. It was retrospective, what the FDA accepted. They agreed with our data. They wanted us to do software validation, and they wanted to go back, pull the toes out that we could actually validate with the software. And that's what they finally 510 cleared device for. So it's temporary clearance of new nail. So we averaged about 5.89 millimeters in 6 months of clear new nail growth.
Yeah, I guess one of the silver linings of rerunning the study 3 times, as the FDA requested, is you get a lot of data. Just in the USA alone, we end up treating around 380 great toes. And that kind of leads us to like worldwide success. Right now, we have over 750 Lunula lasers throughout the world, or actually that's just internationally. But some of the bigger nail clinics out there, such as the London Nail Laser Clinic, great quote here. As a practitioner, it is really straightforward to use. It's hands-free, so it changed for podiatrists who are used to be very hands-on. That has freed up both time and concentration, which we can devote to other patients. The results are better than they were with the hot laser. Our feedback and our photographic results are testimony to that. And kind of on the same lines here, they had a hot laser, same results. Another peer-reviewed publication in the Prime Journal. So up to this point, between the USA and then Dr. Sullivan's data that Steve mentioned, we have published results or data on over 2,700 toes. So what's next?
So we really like to push the envelope with research. We started looking at Jubula. We started looking at their clinical trial. Their clinical trial was 20 to 50% clinical involvement. Ours was up to 100%. So we wanted to look at, what could we do to basically get a drug clean with a device. So submit a protocol to the FDA, 20 to 50% involvement. And you can see Jubula, it's just not that effective. You got a 12% difference between real and placebo. This is a drug that you have to put on your toe every day for a year. If 12%, we wouldn't be a success. The FDA would never approve our device for that. And it's expensive. It's, from my understanding, it's $2,500 a toe. And again, this is photochemistry versus biochemistry. Again, photochemistry is low-level lasers, create peroxynitrate, versus biochemistry, where they're actually targeting the fungus in a different way. We just feel that we want to prove that this is a lot more effective than a drug. So this is the current clinical trial that we're running.
Yeah, and this is a good, I guess this would be more as a comment than a question, but one of our listeners stated that if you look at Sullivan's data, the improvement in nails was 98% in all cases and had a 89.9% success rate, which is a great point.
That's an absolutely fabulous point, because what Dr. Sullivan did is he looked at his toes over a longer period of time than we did. So this is the current clinical trial that we're running. Like I said, this mimics Jubula. The endpoint evaluation is not millimeter clear, it's a clinical clear. Clinical clear is a mycosis, shows up negative. and we have to have at least 12 millimeters of near growth, of new clear nail growth. So if it's dead and there's no new growth, then it's considered a failure. We've got 4 clinical trial sites, 3 in the US and 1 in the United Kingdom. One of them happens to be at the University of Miami. So study design. This one we used Intray or KOH staining. This one is a little bit different since we're looking at a clinical cure, and we're actually looking at the laser more like a drug-like effect. So instead of just stopping at 12 months, we want to look at these toes every 2 months. And while they're coming in every 2 months, we're treating them out to 11 months. We're stopping the treatment at 1 year, and we're doing a 2-month follow-up. At that point, we're doing fungal cultures at each time point at baseline, end of 1 month, 3 months, 5 months, 7 months, 11 months, and 2 months post. We're dealing nail etching. Nail etching will come up into this because this is another thing that we had in the FDA. Unfortunately, I didn't show you some of the other pictures. So the FDA wanted us to etch where the nail was. I go, look, we've already done this before, and it's created an argument with you because the etch kept filling in after about 2 months. So, and they said, look, we request that you do it. We said, all right, we'll go ahead and etch these nails. And we're doing measurement of clear nail and the percentage of clinical onychomycosis involvement determination. So this particular, this is a measurement of clear nail increase. And this is at baseline.
So we have a question in the meantime while Steve's trying to put his old eyes on. What is your recommendation if a patient misses a treatment returning 1 or 2 weeks or 1 month later? At what point should you start again from treatment number 1?
I would say the most critical part of this treatment is getting those 4 treatments in. You know, early on, we just treated with 4 treatments, and we could kind of see that the toes were starting to clear out. And you're going to kind of see, as I go through some of this data, in this particular clinical trial, again, this is only on 20 patients, so we're not done with this clinical trial. At 7 months, fungus is dead. So from there, we're just waiting for the nail to grow. So what we're trying to do at the 2 months treatments is we're trying to do prophylactically, if the fungus is coming back, hit it again with the laser to try to kill the fungus and also try to increase nail growth so we get these nails grow out faster. So this clinical cure measurement of clear nail, this is, remember, clinical cure is negative fungus and clear nail growth. And we're following this at 3 months, 5 months, 7 months, 9 months, 11 months, 12 months, and 2 months post. So you can see at 12 months, 70% of these have clinical cure and myological cure. So compare 70% with this particular device compared to what Jubilee have documented at 12%. So again, this is just one clinical trial site, but this is not a large study. A lot of people ask us, why are your studies so small? Number one, our clinical significance is a lot higher than drugs. We don't have any side effects. Our particular clinical success rate at this clinical trial, the FDA said at 50%. When I asked Neil Ogden, the branch chief, why are we at 50% and Jubilee is documenting 12%? Well, because that's what we determine success is. So at that point, we knew what we were getting. We considered we could live with that. So this next one is percent myological cure. So this is toes that are showing up with the fungus and how much of the fungus of those toes is still there. So you can see at baseline, 40%. At end of treatment, 33%. So we're getting 7% of those toes, the fungus is already dead. At 3 months, we're down to 20% of those toes. At 5 months and 7 months, and if you look at that 7 months chart, you look at the percent of myological rate across the study evaluation, 70% or 100% of those toes, the fungus is dead. Now you're going to start seeing some reinfections coming back at 5 months, but then you go back up to 7 months, you go up to 9 months, and then you look at 2 months post, almost all of it, but one patient got reinfected, and we're going to kind of show you some of that data. We're not really trying to hide anything. Again, this is just preliminary data. We just got this data like last week.
Yeah.
So we just kind of, is one of the reasons why we decided we would do this particular webinar.
And that kind of ties into the question we have here. What is the recurrence rate? Obviously, as Steve just mentioned, this graph is great in showing that. Also, I will I'm not sure who submitted this, but I'll make sure to send you the publication through Sullivan. It had like 343 patients, even though he treated 2,000 plus toes, and only 4 had a sign of reinfection at 48 weeks. But we'll send you all that data.
Okay, and this is percentage of clinical onychomycosis involvement across study evaluation. So we averaged starting out at 40%. Remember, inclusion for this clinical trial was 20 to 50%. So at the end of treatment, we're at about 33%. 3 months post, we're down to 20%. 5 months post, we're down to about 15%. 7 months post, we're down to about 12%. And you can see so on and so on. At 12 months, we had a toe that didn't react, and that continued 2 months post.
Perfect. And it looks like we got like 3 to 5 questions coming in at once. So I'll tell you what, we're 4 to 5 slides from ending. So I'll save those till the end and we'll hit them all at once.
So again, if you look at this picture, this is over time. So the top left is at baseline. The next one is 4 months after treatment, and then 2 months later, and it follows in consecutive 2 months periods. And again, look at the soft tissue, look at the condition of the nail over time. And again, if you look at it, you can see that etch, you can see the etch going up until you can't see the etch anymore. So that nail has regenerated, and that etch that we put in there with the file now is completely gone. And you can just kind of see the nail. It's a healthy nail. So,
And just to expand on that, to make sense of the treatments here, this is, again, we're treating them 9 times. So this is after the first and second treatment was your initial 4 treatments, so basically a month. And then each and every picture after that is bi-monthly, but you can see how much more nail growth you're getting in that.
So, and again, this is another patient. And again, you can see the toe. This was the particular failure that we had. And you can see a big black spot. We don't know if that's damage. They dropped something on their toe. But since the patient didn't say what happened, this was considered a failure. Obviously, again, you can see the toe pretty much regenerated itself. The nail looks better, but this toe did not respond very well. And this was another one. As you can kind of see, the chafing on the toe, the skin looks better, and it's pretty much cleared out fairly rapidly.
You can see quite a bit improvement in the tissue as well from treatment 1 through really 3, but all the way through 9. And then that leads us to the end of the presentation. Like I said, we do have a couple lingering questions. One of them is, I'll let Steve answer this one. Is the EVRL powerful enough to use on toenail fungus?
It is not. We're using 2 17.5 milliwatt diodes in this particular device. The EVRL has like a 0.9 milliwatt and a 7.5 milliwatt diode. We don't know if it works. I have no clue. Obviously, with this particular device, the protocol is locked in, and we don't give that out.
But you know, this is a 12-minute treatment where all 5 nails are getting hit at once. If you were to try to do something with that with a handheld, you're 12 times 5. That's obviously going to eat into a majority of your day there.
Especially if it's both feet.
Yeah, exactly. Another question, do you use something to level out the toes so that each nail gets treatment? Power versus penetration. Again, I think Steve.
Yeah, and how low-level lasers work is, we've been fighting this systemic effect with low-level laser therapy. And the best study we had to prove this is we did 689 patients on one of our products for fat reduction. Because everybody is saying, well, all you're doing is fat shifting. So we measured 689 patients. We lasered waist, hips, and thighs, but we measured systemic points like the knees. We measured the ankles. We measured the chest. We measured arms. Those all sunk. We've also proved cumulative effects of low-level laser therapy in our plantar fasciitis study, where we did pre and post over 8 treatments and showed the blood flow is cumulative over time. So low-level laser therapy is a little bit different than heat laser therapy. It has drug-like components without the side effects. More than just, you have to hit the specific area, you're not going to get a reaction.
Another question, have you done any studies using topical in conjunction? We haven't. Honestly, I don't see a need for it. We're already showing in all of our studies we're increasing clear nail growth by about 1 millimeter a month. Now, when we do set up every provider with the Lunula, we do teach proper hygiene. So obviously there's things that you can do to prevent fungus, such as changing socks, cleaning showers, things of that sort. Topicals, I don't see a really a necessity for them. I do like still debridement the nail though. Anything you want to add to that, Steve?
Yeah, obviously in our clinical trials, we can't add any of those things. If there's something you're seeing that's going to help this condition out, you know, you're the doctor. I would highly suggest using it. We don't recommend it because we don't know. We're just strictly, you know, we're not doctors. We write protocols. We come up with goofy ideas. But you're the doctor. I think whatever you think is going to work, I would add it to it. You know, I would highly suggest if you debride nails, debride them. If you don't. Obviously, you can see we didn't do it in these clinical trials, and it worked out pretty well.
Yeah, another question we have, what do you charge per treatment? I'll base that on what I know in the USA doctors are charging, and that's about $100 per treatment minimum. Some are upwards of about $200 per treatment. That may differ a little bit because I know we have quite a bit of international guests on as well. And then how big is the device? It is, it's about a 1.5 feet wide, 2 feet tall, 23 pounds. We actually put a handle on the backside of it. It's made to really be portable. So if you have 1, 2, 3 offices, you feel free to take it from one office to the next. And then I think we have one more question here. In regards to the last study, Steve, when do you think it will finish up?
That's a really good question. We still have, you know, a couple of clinical trial sites running. I would say it's going to take us at least another 1.5 to 2 years. These, you can see if you're following patients out for 14 months. And the inclusion criteria on these clinical trials is absolutely ridiculous. You know, we didn't really go through the inclusion criteria. If you go on PubMed, I'm sorry, you go clinicaltrials.gov, put in Zirconia, you can see all the clinical research that we can do, but you can look at the inclusion criteria. Imagine you're telling a patient, look, for 14 months in this clinical trial, you're not going to be able to do any topicals. You can't do anything. You can't put on, you know, any kind of lacquer. You can't go to the podiatrist. You can't pretty much do anything. You can clip your toes, and that's pretty much about it. So, you know, these are really, really hard clinical trials to run, but we are 100% committed to this, and we really want that drug indication.
Yeah, and this question here kind of ties into that. So over, I guess the question is, over a year of laser treatment, which is the interval of treatments? I'll base it off the study Steve was just mentioning. What that was is once a week for 4 weeks, and then we treated every other month for 12 months. So it was 9 treatments over a year.
So I would educate your patients. Let them know this, you know, if it's in your gray toe, it's going to take, you know, depending on how included it is, it's going to take 15 months for that toe to grow out if it's healthy. If it's not healthy, some of those toes don't grow. So it's going to take time.
Awesome. I think we make sure here. Looks like we hit all the remaining questions.
Awesome.
Yeah, I think so. So here's our contact information though to our headquarters in Melbourne, Florida. So if you have any additional questions for Steve or I, you can call the toll-free line, which is 888-242-0571. And I thank you guys all for joining on. Stay safe and stay well.
Have a good day. Thank you very much.